For the longest time, one of the biggest demands for a Nintendo Switch controller was larger Joy-Cons, something that captured some of the utility and design of the Joy-Cons that came with the system, but were designed to be more comfortable in larger hands. We finally got those in the form of Hori's Split Pad Pro, as well as a bunch of other later ones that came shortly after. And now that those have been in circulation for a while, Hori is trying something a little bit different with a midpoint design that they are calling the Split Pad Pro Compact. The main goal of these is to be something that offers a lot of the same benefits the Split Pad Pro has, but just not being quite as enlarged for a few different reasons. Either because you had way too much trouble finding a case that would actually fit your Switch with the Split Pad Pro attached, or maybe it's just a bit too much of a shift in the opposite direction where, yeah, the Joy-Cons are too small, but the Split Pad Pro is maybe a bit too big, and so the Compact is hopefully the controller that is just right. Well, I've had these for the past couple of weeks. These were shipped out to me by Hori to try out. These are actually not for sale just quite yet. I think they're releasing shortly after this video is going live. And in the time that I've been using them, I definitely have some thoughts to share. So let's go over how these compare to regular Joy-Cons, the Split Pad Pro, and ultimately whether or not these ones are worth grabbing for you. And the first thing I really want to emphasize is how much of a mid-step these really are between the Joy-Cons and the Split Pad Pro, not just in terms of general body size. I mean, that's the most obvious thing you can see right away when you have them all lined up side by side. The Split Pad Pro just has that bit of extra width. It actually curves down like a more traditional controller, whereas the compact design does feature something a little closer to the regular Joy-Con. It doesn't droop down here. It's a thinner profile overall, but also still noticeably larger than a regular Joy-Con, including having an actual curved back that does give it a little bit of extra comfort for your fingers to wrap around. The general size, though, is not the only place that it's a mid-step. The stick heads, for instance, are ever so slightly shorter than the Split Pad Pro, giving it a bit less range of motion, albeit still quite a bit more than the regular Joy-Cons. The stick head size itself is not as large as the one on the Split Pad Pro, but is, again, larger than the ones on Joy-Cons. The ABXY buttons are larger than regular Joy-Cons, but smaller than the Split Pad Pro. The same is true of the LR and ZL-ZR buttons. The only thing where side by side the Split Pad Pro and Compact are the same in size is the D-pad, which appears to be more or less the exact same one. Feature and function-wise, the list is identical to that at Split Pad Pro, which if you haven't used, the main stuff worth noting here is that you do have an assignable back button that specifically only matches buttons on the same side Joy-Con. So for instance, this button couldn't be mapped to one of the inputs on this side or vice versa, because they are each self-contained units. These are also completely wired designs. You cannot use this wirelessly with the system at all. They must be directly attached to the sides of the Switch to use. It's never going to offer a wireless functionality like the official Joy-Cons or some unlicensed options that you can find online. Along with having the ability to remap this button on the back, both sides also have the ability to activate a turbo function for one given button on each side, which is always a nice little handy feature to have depending on what games you're playing. Feature-wise, it's also worth noting that just like the Split Pad Pro, the Compact is missing out on some core features that are standard on regular Joy-Cons. No NFC reader, which is pretty standard these days, and not a lot of people are worrying about Amiibo too much, but more importantly, you don't have vibration of any form, HD or otherwise, and it does not have gyro control. So if those are important features for games that you're playing often, these are not going to be able to handle that. Now the mid-size thing and feature list are pretty much what you would expect in terms of, again, this is a mid-size option. It still offers all the same benefits and downsides that the Split Pad Pro has. But one thing that I think is worth pointing out too is that there are a couple minute things comparison-wise that aren't really obvious, particularly button feel. Some buttons and things feel basically the same as they do on the full-size Split Pad Pro. In particular, the sticks have basically the same tension. You have a little less range of motion on the Compact because the stick head is ever so slightly shorter, but it is by such a minimal amount that I don't think it's really one that is an important difference. The D-pad is effectively the same D-pad, which is a solid design. Where I really immediately noticed a difference though, because the Split Pad Pro has been my go-to controller for a while, is the feeling of the ABXY button. Official Joy-Cons have a very clicky tactile feedback, whereas the Split Pad Pro went for something that still had that kind of crispness, but not the actual clicky feedback that Joy-Cons have. The Compact is a little softer. I wouldn't necessarily call them mushy, but it's not quite as crisp as the Split Pad Pro is, which depending on your preference could be something that is a big upside or downside. Personally, this is something that I do like a little more than the Split Pad Pro. I really like tactile, clicky feedback, which is something the Joy-Con has, but if you don't have that clickiness, crisp buttons don't necessarily mean as much to me, and I like something that has a little bit more of a soft feel. I feel like that's something that's more comfortable over prolonged periods of time, similar to what the buttons on the Switch Lite have, which this feels just a step closer towards. The plus and minus buttons are also completely different. The Split Pad Pro has these very large, rubbery ones that are pronounced and sticking out, whereas on the Compact, they are much thinner buttons that have a clicky register. At the end of the day, it's not something that's ever a huge deal to me, because in most games, plus and minus are ultimately the things used to open up options, and they're not necessarily impacting how direct gameplay feels, so it's different, but not something I think is going to really heavily impact your gameplay experience. Now, while the ABXY buttons are a little softer compared to the ones on the Split Pad Pro, it's actually the opposite for the back buttons. Again, it's not a massive difference. They are still within kind of the same ballpark, but the back buttons on the Split Pad Pro have a little less clicky register. There's a little more travel distance, whereas this feels like a much shorter push kind of clicky button. Obviously, since the body shape of the Compact is different from the Pro, the actual shape of the back button as well as its placement is a little bit different, and I did find myself liking it a little more. At least for my hands, it just felt like a very natural place to rest and easy access for the buttons. The clicky register and resistance on them is just enough that I never hit the buttons accidentally, which is a good thing. At the end of the day, the Compact is more or less exactly what you would expect it to be. Yes, there are some minute differences like how some of the buttons feel, but ultimately the main takeaway is this is a little smaller than the Split Pad Pro, a little bigger than regular Joy-Cons, and if that's a midpoint you've been looking for, that's something that this controller does accomplish. Now, there's one specific aspect of this that I feel is worth emphasizing, which is fitting this into cases. Because it doesn't have the same kind of curved grip design that the Split Pad Pro does, it does have an easier time fitting into cases vertically, but ultimately the horizontal angle is still an issue. This is noticeably wider than a regular Joy-Con, not as wide as the Pro, but still pretty wide, and if you're using this with a Switch OLED, which is already a slightly wider system to begin with, you're gonna have a harder time fitting this in some more form-fitting style cases. If you have something that's more of a sleeve fit where you can just quickly kind of slide it into a pouch area, it's going to work with those fairly well, but anything where it's a kind of zip-up case, I've definitely found problems with this, unless it is one that is designed to handle in large system situations like for accompanying a grip or something. I will say that in my own personal case, I don't see myself leaving the full-size Pro for the Compact. The Compact was still comfortable to use, but ultimately I found the full-size Pro to just be better for my hands in the long run. So if you don't like regular Joy-Cons, but the Split Pad Pro is too big for you, this might be the midpoint option that you're looking for. So those are my thoughts on the Split Pad Compact. They're releasing very soon, quite possibly they're already out by the time you're seeing this video. I'll have those linked down below in the description, along with the full-size Pro if you're interested in grabbing either of those. As always, if you guys enjoyed the video, hit that thumbs up button to let me know. Thumbs down if you didn't, it's good info for me to have. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and if you do subscribe, make sure to hit that notification bell as well so you actually see when videos get posted. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.